All right, let's pull back the curtain on something that affects pretty much everything you do. We're talking about market control. It's this invisible force that shapes what you buy, how much you pay for it, and even the choices you think you're making. We're going to explore how companies build these modern-day fortresses around their products, locking you in and keeping their competitors out. Okay, let's get right into it. Have you ever felt, just completely trapped by a brand? That feeling when you think about switching your phone or your internet provider and it just seems impossible, like it would be a huge pain? Well, guess what? That is not an accident. It's a very carefully designed strategy, and it's the heart of what we're digging into today. So, what even is market control? At its core, it's all about one or maybe a handful of powerful companies becoming so dominant that they basically get to write the rules of the game. They set the prices, they limit your choices, and they slam the door on anyone who might want to compete with them. To really wrap our heads around this, we're going to follow a pretty clear path. First, we'll see how these corporate fortresses get built in the first place. Then we'll uncover the rulebook they use to stay in power. We'll meet the so-called kings of the market, understand the real cost to you and me, and finally, take a look at the ongoing fight for a more level playing field. So, first up, how does a company actually build its fortress? How do they go from being just another business to the ruler of an entire industry? I can tell you, it doesn't happen by chance. It's a very, very calculated process. And it pretty much boils down to a three-step playbook. First, they create these massive walls to keep any new competitors out. Second, they build what's called a walled garden, an ecosystem so nice and convenient that you never want to leave. And third, they use the sheer power of their user base to get even bigger and stronger. Let's break down that first step. Okay, so think of barriers to entry as the moat around the castle. This can be anything, really. We're talking about the insane cost of building a factory, or owning critical patents that no one else can use, or locking down all the key suppliers. It makes it nearly impossible for a new company to even think about competing. And then you've got the walled garden. Your smartphone is the absolute perfect example of this. The apps, the hardware, the services, they're all designed to work perfectly with each other and, well, not so well with anything from the outside world. It's this beautiful, super convenient little world that very subtly locks you in and gives the company total control. All right, so the fortress is built, the walls are up. But now comes the really hard part. How do you maintain and expand that power? Well, this requires a whole different set of rules. We're talking about the raw tactics of dominance. And this right here shows the difference in black and white. On one side, you've got a healthy, competitive market. That's what gives us cool new ideas and fair prices. But on the other side, you get a controlled market. That's where innovation just dies on the vine, prices mysteriously creep up, and new ideas get locked out. Now, one of the most obvious tactics is collusion. This is when companies that are supposed to be fierce rivals secretly get together and agree not to compete. They'll fix prices behind closed doors or carve up the market so they don't step on each other's toes. The end result? They all get rich, and we pay for it. Then there are these things called tying arrangements. Just imagine this. What if, to buy the hottest new video game console, you were forced to also buy a TV made by that same company? That's tying. It's using a super popular product to shove a less popular one down your throat, and in the process, it just crushes any other TV makers out there. And maybe the most powerful tactic in our modern world is gatekeeping. I mean, think about it. If you control the App Store or the search engine or the big online shopping platform, you literally control the flow of business itself. You become the gatekeeper, and you get to decide who gets to play in the market and who doesn't. So we've seen the playbook they use. Now let's actually meet the players. Who are these kings of the market that have so much power? This shows you the whole spectrum of market power. At one end, you've got a healthy competitive market with lots of different businesses. At the other extreme, a total monopoly with just one company. But what you really need to pay attention to is that middle ground, the oligopoly. That's where just a few giants are calling all the shots. And believe me, it's way more common than you think. Monopoly power is basically the final boss of market control. It means one company is the only game in town. They can jack up prices, let their quality slip, and what are you going to do about it? There's literally nowhere else for you to go. But an oligopoly can be just as bad, if not worse. Think about industries like airlines or cell phone providers. When you only have a few big players, they don't need some secret handshake in a dark room to act together. Their prices and policies just sort of move in lockstep. It creates this kind of unspoken monopoly. Okay, this all sounds a bit theoretical, I know, but it has very real consequences for all of us. So let's talk about the actual price you pay when companies get this much control. So, what's the financial result of all this dominance? Well, it's pretty simple. Massive, massive profits. These dominant companies can charge way more than they ever could if they had real competition. And that extra money, it doesn't just appear out of thin air, it comes straight from our pockets. But it's not just about paying more. When there's no real competition, there's way less incentive to get better or to innovate. I mean, why would you spend a ton of money making a better product if your customers have no other choice anyway? So yeah, the potential for lower quality is a direct and really damaging consequence. And this brings us right back to where we started, that feeling of being trapped. It actually has a name. It's called customer lock-in. By creating what are called high switching costs, like you'd lose all your data or have to buy a bunch of new accessories, companies make it so painful to leave that most of us just don't, even if we're not happy. Now, this might all sound a little bit bleak, but it is not a one-sided fight. There are actually powerful forces out there working to tear down these fortresses and make sure the marketplace is fair for everybody. You'll hear companies defend these tactics all the time with fancy words like efficiency or optimization, but let's be really clear here. As this quote points out, at the end of the day, these tactics are fundamentally anti-competitive, and in a lot of places, they're straight up against the law. And the main weapon in this fight is something called antitrust regulation. These are the laws on the books designed to break up monopolies, to block unfair mergers, and to punish companies for things like collusion. They are the essential counterbalance to unchecked corporate power. And all of this leaves us with a really critical question for our time. The big digital platforms of today, they're the new walled gardens, the new gatekeepers. They have immense power over our lives. So the challenge is clear. How do we make sure that these modern ecosystems actually promote real competition and innovation instead of becoming the inescapable fortresses of tomorrow?